You ever think about how a single day can just change everything for a whole country? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're going to look at one of the bloodiest days in American history and see how it didn't just end a battle, it completely redefined the soul of the nation. Just look at that number, 23,000. That's how many American soldiers, and we're talking Union and Confederate, were killed, wounded, or missing after just one day of fighting. September 17th, 1862, it is still, to this day, the single bloodiest day in all of American history. So yeah, the human cost was just staggering. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. The real story is how this one day of unimaginable carnage set the stage for one of the most important transformations the country has ever seen. So how on earth does that happen? All right, so let's set the scene. We're on the fields near Sharpsburg, Maryland. This is where the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, led by the legendary Robert E. Lee, slammed into the Union's Army of the Potomac under General George McClellan, and it was an absolutely desperate and brutal fight. Now, to really get why this battle mattered so much, you gotta zoom out a bit. Because in the fall of 1862, America was at a huge crossroads. It was facing two gigantic problems at the exact same time, one on the battlefield and another for the very heart and soul of the nation. So on the one hand, you've got General Lee making this incredibly bold gamble. His plan? Invade the North, maybe influence their elections, and this is the big one, get European powers like Britain and France to officially recognize and support the Confederacy. Meanwhile, the Union was in a really tough spot. They'd taken some bad losses and morale was in the basement. They needed a win, badly. And while all this is going on, you've got President Lincoln wrestling with this massive dilemma. Personally, he hated slavery. He wanted it gone. But politically, it was a nightmare. If he acted too boldly against slavery, he risked pushing critical border states like Maryland, where this very battle was about to happen, right into the arms of the Confederacy. So what does Lincoln do? He plays the long game. See, he'd already written a draft of an Emancipation Proclamation, but he absolutely knew that timing was everything. If he issued it while the Union was losing, it would just look like a desperate last-ditch Hail Mary. No, for this to have real power, it had to come from a position of strength. He was waiting for a victory. And that right there is what brings us back to Antietam. This wasn't just another battle on a map. This was the moment where the military future and the moral future of the war were both going to be decided. The fighting that day was just unbelievable. Absolute chaos across cornfields, over stone bridges, and in a sunken farm road that earned the name Bloody Lane. At the end of the day, it was kind of a draw. But critically, Lee's battered army was forced to retreat back to Virginia. It wasn't a clean sweep, but Lee's invasion was stopped. And that was the strategic victory the Union and Lincoln were waiting for. So, Lee is retreating. The immediate threat is over. And for Lincoln, this is it. This is the moment. The victory at Antietam gave him the political cover he needed to do something truly radical, to change the entire meaning of the war. And man, Lincoln did not mess around. He moved fast. The battle was fought on September 17th. Just 5 days later, on September 22nd, bam, he issues his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. You can draw a direct, undeniable line from the blood spilled on that battlefield to this historic political action. So, what did this thing actually say? Well, it was a really powerful and super carefully worded executive order. It declared that on January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in the states that were currently in rebellion would be thenceforth and forever free. Now notice that wording, in rebellion. That was key. This was a direct shot at the Confederacy's power structure. And look, this was so much more than just words on a page. This was a seismic shift. This order transformed the war. It was no longer just about preserving the Union. It was now a revolutionary fight for freedom. Let's break down just how much it changed everything. First, it declared over 3.5 million people in the South to be free. Second, it officially made the war a moral crusade against slavery. Third, and this was a huge game changer, it authorized the enlistment of black soldiers into the Union Army. And finally, it slammed the door shut on any hope the Confederacy had of getting help from Europe. I mean, how could anti-slavery countries like Britain and France possibly side with a nation that was now officially fighting for slavery? Just let that number sink in for a second. 3.5 million people. Now, was it a magic wand? No. Freedom still had to be won, town by town, as the Union armies advanced. But for millions, this proclamation was an official promise from the government. It was a powerful beacon of hope. And the proclamation did something else that was totally revolutionary for the war effort. It opened the door for nearly 200,000 black men to join the Union Army. Think about that. You now have men fighting not just for a country, but for their own freedom and the freedom of their families. That is a powerful, powerful force, and it was absolutely critical to winning the war. So when you step back and look at the big picture, the legacy of that single bloody day in Maryland is just massive. The incredible sacrifice on that battlefield directly paved the way for a brand new and freer America. I mean, you can literally trace the steps, right? Step 1, Antietam provides the victory Lincoln so desperately needs. Step 2, that victory allows him to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which changes the entire point of the war. Step 3, that moral and political momentum leads directly to the 13th Amendment in 1865, which finally abolished slavery for good everywhere in the U.S. One thing led directly to the next. It's like historian Robert Kennedy said, the courage of those soldiers at Antietam wasn't just about preserving unity. It was about creating a new kind of freedom for the entire nation. Which leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question to think about. What if? What if the Union line had broken at Antietam? If Lee had won that day and Lincoln never got the victory he needed, how different would our history, our country, look today? It just goes to show you, sometimes everything really does turn on a single day.